Welcome to the Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Perda. I'm a life and marriage coach, wife, mom of three, an Aries, and for my fellow human design nerds, a sacral manifesting generator. This podcast is for women who want to be happier in their marriage as they navigate their journey through motherhood. Even if you're like me and you weren't shown how while growing up. In each episode, I'll be covering topics that will help you love and enjoy your marriage again without waiting until your kids are all grown up. And a quick note, you may want to pop your earbuds in if your kids are also listening, because nothing is left unsaid on this show, which means there may be times where something is said that you don't want them to hear. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about differences in communication styles. Many of you are having trouble with communicating, handling tougher issues, or even just daily ones. And it's starting to really affect your connection with your spouse. So I thought it'd be a great topic to dive into because there are so many ways to have different communication styles. And I think it's important to know what those are so that you can not only identify what those differences are, but also become more aware of what the pros are of each of them and learn to appreciate how your partner is a different communicator, and then figure out how to bridge the gap so that you two can become communicators that can actually use conflict to grow your marriage. Okay, so communication differences. So communication styles can vary greatly between individuals, and understanding these differences is critical for effective communication in your marriage. Especially as moms, we don't have the time to just be like figuring everything out, right? We've got so many hats that we wear, so many responsibilities. So I wanted to break this down so that we can make it easier for you, so that communication, something that we do on a daily basis, that we need to be able to do in our marriage to be able to not only survive, but thrive in it, and with less frustration and less stress. And this is the vehicle that we need to use to be able to build that connection that we have with our partners, because if you can't communicate, it's really hard to build on that foundation, right? Like, how can you get to know each other better? How can you ask for support? How do you get things done together? How are you partners without that communication? Okay. So by recognizing and appreciating each other's communication styles, you can enhance your understanding and connection in your relationship. Okay. So the very first way that you can have communication differences is verbal and nonverbal communication. Okay. So verbal, it's like very obvious, right? The words that we use. Some people naturally express themselves through spoken words. So they tend to be more talkative. They like to vocalize their thoughts and their feelings, and they rely on verbal cues to express themselves. Okay. So such as the word choice, your volume in which you speak with, your tone, right? The things that you hear when you communicate. People who lean towards verbal communication tend to be more direct in their conversations, and they appreciate clear and specific communication, okay? Those who lean more towards nonverbal communication, they will rely more on nonverbal cues like your facial expressions, your body language, the space that you have between you two, gestures, anything that you see and feel, even your energy, your emotions without even outwardly expressing them. It's something that you can feel in the presence of a conversation. These people tend to be more attuned to subtle nuances and non-verbal cues in conversations because, hello, this is how they are used to communicating. So they're going to be better at picking that stuff up, right? So understanding and interpreting these cues can help create a deeper level of understanding between partners. Now, as you can see, there are good things about both styles, right? Both verbal and nonverbal cues in communication are important and helpful to pay attention to. In fact, There's a researcher out there. His name is Albert. I cannot say his last name, so I'm sorry. I'm pretty sure it starts with an M. But he studied body language. Communication is delivering a message, right? So if I say, hey, let's go to the park, that's me delivering a message. But within that message lies a certain percentage of how we receive that message. So 55% of that message is actually from nonverbal cues, right? Things that we see or feel, while only 7% comes from the words that we use. The other 38% comes from what we hear. So tone, vocal clarity, and verbal expressiveness. Only listening to someone's verbal communication, like words, tone, volume, etc., excludes more than half of the message that's being communicated. Okay, so this is why we need to expand our awareness. So if you tend to be more of a verbal communicator, you're probably going to be hung up on words that the other person uses. But the thing with that is that sometimes words mean different things to each person, or even phrases. So for example, if I say, oh, that sucks, it could be really light to me, but to someone else, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you just said that. Like my mom personally hates that word. She always corrects my kids anytime they try and say that word because she thinks it's like profanity almost. It's just rude. But for me, I'm like, no, I don't think it's rude at all. So there's so many different things that can come into play here, which is why nonverbal communication is an added layer of understanding how they're receiving the message or what they're saying, right? So when my oldest son, he's 13 now, when he was a toddler, we thought that he was picky before we met my second son. Okay, he's got sensory issues, so he is way more picky. But at the time, we thought that my oldest was really picky, to the point where we would give him food and what he said and the body language that he conveyed did not match. He'd be like, it's good, right? Like, if you can't see me because you're listening to this, his eyes were shifting left and right, and you can just tell he was forcing it, right? Like the words he was using did not align with what his body was communicating to me. Now, had I only paid attention to his words, I would have been like, okay, I'm going to make this part of our weekly rotation because you like it, because that's what you're telling me. But because I have become more attuned with the full picture, I was able to read his nonverbal communication and understand that he, in fact, did not like it at all. And so opening yourself up to be more attuned to your partner when he speaks, whether it's verbal or non-verbally, it can enhance your ability to understand him better and vice versa. Okay. The second way that you can have differences is between being a direct communicator and an indirect communicator. Some people are super direct and tell you how it is, and they're very articulate with expressing themselves, while others like to kind of beat around the bush and prefer to be less forward so not to hurt the other person's feelings. So they'll communicate with more subtlety and prefer their listener connect the dots. Okay. This is really big in couples who come from different cultures and upbringings. And this can lead to a lot of misunderstandings if you don't take the time to understand that you have differences here, especially if you have one indirect and one direct. The direct person will be very confused about what the indirect person is trying to communicate, while the indirect person is viewing the direct communicator as someone who's a little harsh and abrasive. Okay. So for example, if you are a direct communicator and your partner is an indirect communicator, you're going to want to hone your skills on paying attention to your partner's nonverbal cues so that you can decipher what they're actually trying to communicate with you, so you can ask more direct questions to help you understand and confirm and clarify what they're trying to say without actually saying it. And you can start to pick up on patterns like their tells so that you can talk about it and then add more clarification to what they're actually trying to say instead of making assumptions about what they think or feel or want. Okay, so curiosity here is truly your best friend in this scenario. Now, if your partner is direct and you're the one that's indirect, direct communication, like I said, can feel really harsh. If this is the case, you'll want to ask some questions to clarify what they mean and if what you heard is what they meant for you to hear. This can help them make adjustments to soften the way they communicate while you build your understanding of what they're actually saying, even if it's not the same way that you would have communicated it. So it's all about awareness, communication, and also finding a way to bridge the gap with each other, not to change the other person, but more so help yourself be more understanding and appreciative of their style of communication and naturally adapt towards each other to create a more seamless way of handling communication. The third way is emotional expression. This is probably the biggest thing that I've noticed in my clients. Typically, the female is a lot more emotionally expressive while the man is a little bit more emotionally unavailable. Now, this all depends on the comfort level, how they were raised, right? Just like you. If you grew up not having your emotions welcomed, not having them teased out for you to fully express themselves, and you were told to stop, to get over it, anything that was dismissive, of course, you're going to be less emotionally aware and less confident to be vulnerable and express yourself emotionally, right? On the other hand, if your parents are like, yeah, how do you feel? It looks like you're really upset. And they really sat down and talked to you about them and didn't shame you for how you felt and really let you sit with your emotions and they were supportive of you, then you're going to feel a lot more free and comfortable and confident about it because that was your upbringing, right? So these create differences, whether you're reserved about it or you're not reserved about it, whether you process it internally or you process it externally. It all depends on what you were modeled growing up. And it's important to understand what's my style and what's my partner's style, not to say that, oh, if I'm more open, I am the better communicator. Not necessarily, right? Because I felt like I was open and I just like word vomited on my husband in the beginning years of our marriage. And that kind of caused a lot of harm because it was not processed emotions. It was very much out of anger in reaction to, instead of intentionally communicating and expressing my emotions, I was just like spilling it all over on him and making him deal with it. So it's important to validate and accept each other's preferred method of emotional expression, whether it's overt or understated. All right. And there are ways, again, through curiosity to tease it out of your partner to develop a more open communication style at their own pace. Okay. I need to emphasize that. Underline, bold, italicize, highlight, right? We have to go at their pace. If we push, they can shut down. So we want to make sure that we're setting them up for success. And this is more of a long game kind of approach. Okay. The fourth way is listening preferences. There are two different listening styles. There is active listening where we are engaging, we're asking clarifying questions, we're offering feedback, we're giving affirmations. And then there's reflective listening where you listen and you just prefer to take in the information and listen to it and process it before responding. So these people are going to be more of the delayed response type of person, whereas the active listener is more like ongoing. As you say things, they're responding, right? I'm more of a active listener. And when you have these differences, it can feel like maybe they're not there, maybe they're not interested, but there is a difference, right? It doesn't mean that they're not listening. It could just mean that they're trying to make sense of the information before responding, and they're a lot more intentional and reserved about how they communicate in response to what someone's saying. Okay. For example, my husband is very different than me. He is not quick to respond at all. And as someone who is like very, very witty, I'm very quick on my feet, he is not, or I should say he is less so. And so waiting for him to acknowledge what I'm saying is I'm like just sitting at the edge of my seat and I'm just like waiting, like, when are you going to say something? It can be really hard, but patience has paid off for me. And it's actually related to the fifth type, which is the final one. And that's timing. Some people are more comfortable addressing issues or having important conversations ASAP. Take a guess about which one I am, right? That's me. While others need more time to process their thoughts, process their feelings before they can engage in dialogue. Now, this is where it's really important to pay attention, okay? Because if you jump the gun, like I have so many times in the past, and sometimes I still do, depending on like how much I'm taking care of myself and how pressing the issue is, or how emotional I feel, this sets it up for failure, okay? And this is also where I love to use a tool called human design with my clients, because it's really been so important to understand what type of timing you do best with, depending on how you experience your emotions. Okay, I'm not going to get too much into it, but I'm going to share a story with you from clients that I just wrapped up with. They're a couple. Now, one partner is what one would call in emotional authority, while the other one was not. And so because she experiences emotions much more strongly and it colors her perspective a lot more, she needed a lot more time to process information, to sit with her feelings, to let the emotional wave subside so that she could then take a look at the full picture and come into the conversation with more clarity. Now, her husband does not have an emotional authority, and he's just, okay, I'm ready to talk. This is bothering me. Let's go. In the past, before working together, he would push her and push her and push her, or go the opposite and just completely avoid the conversation because he knows that he's not going to get what he needs from her because she's never going to want to talk, right? She wanted to avoid conversations because they never ended well. After learning this about themselves, her being an emotional authority, him learning that she's an emotional authority, he started to understand like, oh, we are not the same in this way. And if I want a productive, successful conversation that leads to a resolution, that leads to us strengthening our relationship, I need to work on my trust and my patience. Trust that she's doing what she can in her time to be ready to talk about this, and that she will let me know when she's ready. And patience to wait because he wants to go. He wants to talk about it. He wants to get it off his chest. And for her, it was about not feeling rushed to have a conversation when she's not ready. She needed that extra time to feel calm to have the conversation so that she wouldn't say anything she would regret. She wouldn't start yelling. She wouldn't shut down. Whatever coping mechanism that you might have, if you're also like her, it's really important to respect the timing of it, right? Like checking in, kind of like setting up a meeting, right? Does this time work for you? Does that time work for you? Versus ambushing your partner like, hey, I have these strong feelings. I need to sort this out and we need to talk this second. Okay. I used to do that. It has never ended well with me, ever. Has never ended well whenever I did that. My husband is like my client who, not an emotional authority, but needed additional time. And so I've had to learn over the years the hard way that when I wait, it is way better. not only have I had time to calm down and get clear on what it is that's bothering me, what it is that I need from him, what it is that I feel like I need to get off my chest and be able to approach him with more respect and kindness and personal responsibility. But then he's also able to be ready instead of sharing half-baked thoughts and perspectives. So you want to take a look at it with a much more long-term approach because, yes, patience is really hard, especially if you're impatient like me. But what would you rather have, right? Would you rather have a successful conversation or would you rather have a shitstorm that just ends terribly and also doesn't get resolved, right? So when you focus on, okay, how can I set our conversation up for success? Anchor into that, and that will help you be more patient, okay? Now, those are the 5 different styles that you can have differences when you communicate. Like I said, it's a lot, which is why communication can be so challenging. And by understanding and appreciating your different communication styles, communication can become so much easier with your husband. You're going to be able to create new ways of dealing with conflict together in ways that have a lot more empathy, compassion, patience, understanding, flexibility, and resilience. Effective communication involves active learning and adapting to each other's styles. So you're growing towards each other and with each other rather than trying to change or impose your communication preferences onto the other person, right? Nobody likes to be told what to do. But if they naturally decide because it makes sense for them, they want to do it, that's different and way more motivating. Now, doing this is going to lead to smoother and more harmonious communication and ultimately strengthening your marriage, helping you feel closer, helping you develop more emotional intimacy. And you're just gonna be able to enjoy more moments in your marriage rather than just have so many fights, so many arguments that break your marriage apart and create more disconnect, okay? I always say that conflict should evolve in your marriage, and awareness is one way to go about this. So hopefully listening to this has helped you expand your awareness. And if you have been having a hard time making progress to resolve your communication challenges, I encourage you to get support, whether that's through my Marriage Communication Essentials course or working with me one-on-one or as a couple in marriage coaching. If you're interested in coaching, I invite you to schedule a free clarity call with me so that we can get to know each other and we can get you help that you need. Okay? That's it for this episode. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and review. I would so appreciate that. And if you love what I share here, then you're going to love and want to join my free private Facebook community that's also called Marriage and Motherhood. I hope to see and connect with you in there. Otherwise, I'll catch you back here next week for the next episode. Bye!